それではこれよりプログラムに沿って進めさせていただきます。第1部、ダグラス・ブルックス様より私が見た日本の和船文化というタイトルで基調講演を賜ります。
First, I would like to thank the organizers of this symposium, the Tenryugawa Wasen Bunka Hozonkai and Genki Zukurishin of Nagano Prefecture, for making this event a reality and inviting me to speak. Much of my work as a boat builder in the United States has involved collaborating with museums and municipalities, building replicas of traditional boats as public demonstrations. These projects involve researching traditional boat designs, teaching, as well as boat building. I enjoy the varied aspects of this type of work, appreciating both working with my hands and as well as engaging the public in a teaching role and writing about my projects. I have built 5 wasen in the United States, 2 as exhibitions at museums, and 3 for Japanese gardens. Over the course of 23 visits to Japan spanning 28 years, I have apprenticed with 7 boat builders on Satogashima, Urayasu, Tokyo, Aomori, Okinawa, Iwate, and Gifu. In addition, I have traveled to all of Japan's 47 prefectures, meeting and interviewing over 50 boat builders. My teachers were in their 70s and 80s at the time I studied with them, and for 6 of them, I was their sole apprentice. The last century was a pivotal time for this craft. The devastation of World War II forced one more generation to assume the work of their fathers. But the rapid recovery and ascendance of the Japanese economy starting in the 1960s pulled the children of these men into the corporate jobs of a new Japan. In a single generation, the apprentices the craft depended on had disappeared. I was working as the museum boat builder at the Maritime Museum in San Francisco when I accepted the invitation of my college roommate, who was from Hiroshima, to visit Japan. On that first trip, I met several boat builders and became exposed to a world of craft both mysterious and alluring. I met craftsmen who possessed extraordinary skills, yet also discovered the craft was only transmitted via an ancient apprentice system. Eventually, one of the boat builders I met invited me to be his student, and in 1996, he and I built a taraibune, a unique boat still used on Sado Island in the Sea of Japan. In 2003, the Kodo Cultural Foundation, with funding from the Nippon Foundation, published my first book, The Tugboats of Sado Island, A Japanese Craftsman's Methods. The goal of my book was to provide people with a step-by-step description of how to build tugboats. It includes my drawings, which record my teacher's methods for laying down the lines, using shaku, the same measuring system he used. It also includes instructions for braiding the bamboo hoops. Since its publication, my book has been used by craftspeople reviving barrel making, and Sado's new professional taraibune builder has told me he learned entirely from my book. The techniques of boat building, like many Japanese crafts, are shrouded in secrecy. Most of my teachers use no drawings whatsoever, working entirely from memory. Drawings, where they did exist, were left intentionally incomplete. The goal of my work has been to document as much as I can, essentially writing the secrets down in an effort to preserve the designs and techniques of boat building. It was my first teacher who taught me the phrase "nusumi geiko." He told me he used to sneak into his master's workshop at night with a candle and study his layout. He finally managed to learn his master's dimensions, but he also realized his master was drawing lines that made no sense, intentionally trying to confuse his apprentice. Most of my teachers insisted on complete silence in the workshop. There was no speaking. I had to learn entirely by observation. The first job I was given was to sweep the floor, then sharpen tools. Finally, when I was told to work, if I did not do the work perfectly, I was sent back to sweeping. This was unlike any teaching I had ever experienced, but I will say it made me highly motivated. I was allowed to ask questions at lunch break, but my teacher's usual answer was, "Watch and you will understand," and nothing more. This was all completely strange to me. In America, I have access to hundreds of drawings of traditional boats. My bookshelves are full of books about the craft, and there are schools and workshops all across America and Europe that teach traditional boat building. While individual craftspeople in the West certainly kept secrets, there has been an even stronger tradition of documenting crafts. And in America, there was a development of trade schools where crafts were taught using the model of modern education. In 2017, I worked with Mr. Seiichi Nasu, one of the last builders of ukaibune in Gifu. Together, we built a traditional ukaibune. Just like my previous projects, I documented as thoroughly as possible Nasu-san's design and dimensions, information that only he knew. It would be impossible to record this information without working directly with him. For instance, Nasu-san used odd patterns to record important bevels, but none of his patterns was labeled. Only Nasu-san understood their meaning. As inaccessible as this information may seem, as a boat builder, I am fascinated with how Japanese craftsmen use their creativity to simplify the layout of their designs, a necessity when one has to memorize all the various dimensions for a boat. This is one reason why, when I draw my teacher's wasen, I use shaku, the same measuring system they use, and I record their methods for drawing the lines rather than standardized methods used by naval architects. Each Japanese boat builder had their individual system, which they had refined to make as efficient as possible. To me, this represents a kind of folk cultural knowledge worth preserving for its own sake. To show you an example, this is my Urayasu teacher's drawing of his bekabune. The top half is the profile view of the boat. The bottom half is the plan view. The problem is, you cannot build a boat from this drawing because it is incomplete. The plan view of two lines are missing, and my teacher intentionally left them out to protect his secrets. Now here is my drawing of the same boat. You can see the two missing lines. Also, I provide the dimensions of my teacher's patterns, which he told me he burned after building each boat. My drawings are captioned in English and Japanese, and I have copies here you can study and learn his method for memorizing the missing dimensions. Again, I use shaku because often the dimensions boat builders use are easy to remember numbers. Converting them to metric obscures the craftsperson's ingenuity. The bigger question, in my opinion, is how to make this information accessible to the widest audience possible, hopefully encouraging others to try to build wasen. One of my partners in my Gifu research was Tobunken, a division of the Bunkacho. Next year, they are publishing my manuscript on how to build the ukaibune, along with my drawings and photographs. They are also editing a video of the entire project. Working with my friend Masashi Kutsuwa, director of the furniture program at Gifu Academy of Forest Science and Culture, we created an email group called Wasen Network. This has brought together amateur boat builders, teachers, researchers, and people who just love traditional boats. We share contacts, resources, and information, and I welcome anyone here today to join. I think it is a critical first step to saving wasen has to be networking with others who share this interest. Japan's last generation of boat builders worked through an era of incredible change, and part of their genius was also an ability to adapt to the transformation of Japan in the post-war period. In Iwate, for instance, Murakami-san was a working boat builder until recently, and as such he developed extremely innovative ways to use modern power tools to perform traditional techniques. The pressure to produce boats as efficiently as possible was constant throughout his career. Eventually, his work succumbed to competition from mass-produced fiberglass boats. Yet in his techniques, particularly the use of power tools and glue, I see an opportunity to make this style of boat building more accessible to amateurs. The average boat building apprenticeship in Japan lasted 6 years. The apprentice worked for little or no pay 6 or 7 days a week. It was obviously a very difficult process, but the craftspeople who emerged from this system had remarkable skills. Here is a boat builder from Ofunato, Iwate, who spent his career building small wooden fishing boats. He also built the wooden vase and inlaid valise you see here. He also built this, a replica of an Edo-era Sengoku bune. He and his crew of Tohoku boat builders built 4 of these vessels. He told me that as a boat builder, he knew he could understand the thinking of the Edo-era shipbuilders and relearn their secrets. I would like to see a revival of traditional boat building in Japan, like we have seen in Europe and America. But the traditional apprentice system is not going to be able to save the craft. There is a need now to record more Wasen designs and offer opportunities for amateur boat builders to be exposed to these techniques. In the last 5 years, I have built Wasen for the Seto-uchi Festival in Takamatsu, the Mizunoki Bijutsukan in Kameoka, a nonprofit in Himi, and at the Takenaka Dogukan in Kobe. I taught apprentices for 2 of those projects and taught Wasen workshops in Kobe. I now teach a class building Wasen with students at an American university. In this class, I try to introduce the values of the Japanese apprenticeship, and most of the class is conducted in silence. In 1 month, 15 students build 1 or 2 Wasen, which we launch in the university swimming pool because it is the middle of winter. There are also individuals throughout Japan interested in Wasen. One is my friend Toshihiku Shibufuji-san of Kochi City. He has been collecting boat builders' drawings and studying the traditional boats of Tosa for years. He taught himself how to build Wasen, and now he is teaching others. Hirohito Kataoka-san is here with us today, and he is one of Shibufuji-san's students. Together they teach a high school Wasen building class in Kochi, and last fall Kataoka-san took me to meet 3 boat builders along the Shimantogawa, where we measured several riverboats. One place that has seen a real revival of boat building is Okinawa, where sailors, surfers, and others became interested in racing sabani, the traditional Okinawan fishing boat. 20 years ago, groups began restoring old sabani and also ordering new ones from Okinawa's last 3 boat builders. I studied with one of the boat builders in 2009, and several other people, including one woman, have apprenticed with the other 2. Now, over 35 teams compete in a series of races throughout Okinawa, supporting a new generation of sabani builders. I hope to keep publishing my research and find more venues to build Wasen and teach these techniques. It is the least I can do to honor the generosity of my own teachers, the last generation of Japanese boat builders. I am now working with America's oldest boat building school, the Apprentice Shop in Rockland, Maine, on a boat building exchange program with Japan. In November, I will be bringing a graduate from the school with me on my 8th apprenticeship, this time with a boat builder in Himi, Toyama. The hope is we can bring American boat building apprentices here to learn Japanese boat building and perhaps bring Japanese to America to experience the style of training in a Western boat building school. The goal of my work is very straightforward. I believe it is not enough to save historic Wasen in museum collections. We must also save the skills that built Wasen. In my opinion, this is the best way to honor the remarkable legacy of my teachers, the last generation of Japan's traditional boat builders. Your participation in this symposium makes me believe that all of us, working together, can find a way to make this dream a reality. Nagano ken no minasama, arigatou gozaimasu.
ダグラス・ブルックス様、ありがとうございました。